Hello, readers. Welcome to 20 Questions with Your Favorite Author, where we ask authors important questions like, why would you agree to be on this podcast? I'm Kelly Lynn Colby, Editorial Director at Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. Our guest this week is David B. Coe, speculative fiction writer and freelance editor. David, also known as D.B. Jackson, is the multiple award-winning author of 30 novels and as many short stories. David has co-edited 5 short fiction anthologies with Zombies Need Brains and has recently launched a freelance editing business. If he's not your favorite now, he will be after. Welcome, David. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining the chaos. I mean, it's a little bit organized chaos, but chaos can be fun.
Yep.
Yeah. Chaos is the way to go. So we met at JordanCon just a few weeks ago. And we had pretty much,
Almost
we had
2
a lot of
months
fun.
ago now.
Is it 2 months ago? No.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I guess you've recovered, huh?
From the con or meeting you?
Oh, there's no recovery for meeting me.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay.
It's permanent. You are permanently scarred. You're welcome. So I say on your bio, it says that your work has been translated into a dozen languages.
Yes.
Languages fascinate me. I was wondering, were any of those super exciting to you? Which one were you cool?
So several of the languages were for a novelization I did of the Ridley Scott Robin Hood movie with Russell Crowe that came. So I wrote the novelization of that movie. And
that's so cool.
It was kind of cool. I mean, I could tell you stories, but I'd have to have you sign an NDA.
Not recording?
Yeah. But it was an interesting experience, and they paid me money up front, which was good because the movie didn't do all that well. But when they were marketing the movie, they were thinking it was going to be a worldwide smash, and so I had stuff that was translated into Thai, which was really cool.
That is cool. Do you have a copy?
I do somewhere. Yeah, up in my attic I do. And it has the same picture, just you can't understand a word of it. And that picture of Russell Crowe with the bow pulled back. And then I was the very first language I was translated into was Dutch, which was very interesting because I'm Dutch on my father's side. So it was kind of funny that somehow I made it into the Dutch market. And I probably have the biggest following in France. My Winds of the Foreland series, which came out, the last book came out in 2005, 2006, and I still pull royalties in France from that one 18 years later. So that's kind of cool.
What do you think it is about that series that's just really appealing in France?
I think the land has a certain European feel to it, the structure of the land, and a lot of my stories are set in real world places in the States. So like my Thief Taker series is set in pre-revolutionary Boston. I have a series set in Arizona. The new series, the first book has big scenes in Las Vegas. That series, it's its own world and it feels very universal. And I just think the French, and plus the artwork rocked. The French artwork was amazing. And that helped, I think. So,
yeah. I mean, artwork will sell a book every time.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just something about it.
So, are people who are watching this seeing the artwork for the new series underneath?
Yeah, whatever covers you sent me, that's what's streaming underneath. Okay, so there's multiple, the 4 or 5, however many it is that you sent. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some really good artwork in there. I have a wonderful publisher right now, and she does great artwork.
That's really cool. It's important. Yeah, we laughed the first day at Dallas Fan Expo. The book that sold the most was one from an author who wasn't even with us. Because the cover was just really appealing, right? And they were like, "Ooh, I will take that." And we were still learning our pitch again, right? You know how you it's like, I've had this book for 4 years. You would think I would know the pitch like the back of my hand, but it takes a minute to get back into it. And they're like, "Ooh, that cover."
Yeah. No, I get it. I totally get it. There are some
100%.
covers. It's just like, let me give you my money.
Yep. I'm like, can we just print everything in that cover? Maybe we just need to do that.
Right.
Let's see. Dave wants to know, do you consider yourself a writer who edits or an editor who writes?
I am absolutely a writer who edits. I've been writing professionally for close to 30 years now. I've been editing professionally for 6 years. So
Uh,
yeah, I'm a writer who edits. I love editing.
mhm.
I enjoy the process and all of that, but I'm a writer who edits. I haven't crossed over to the dark side entirely.
I don't know. I kind of like the dark side myself.
Well, I'm not saying I won't. I'm just saying I haven't done it yet.
Not there yet, right? Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
get that. I get that.
yeah.
Um, a common question I get from new writers is whether they should use their real name or a pen name. Why do you choose to use a pen name also?
So I started using the DB Jackson pen name well into my career. I had
Mhm.
at that point 11 novels out from Tor, all of them epic fantasies. And I had an idea for what became the Thief Taker series. It was going to be historical urban fantasy. And Tor basically said, you have a brand as David B. Coe, and people expect a certain kind of book from that. And we're not sure we want to mess with that brand. And
Mm.
so we'd like you to write these under a different name. So I
So
was
it wasn't
fine
your
with that.
idea. The publisher was like, maybe.
Right. Yeah, it was their idea. They made it clear that if I did it under my own name, they could pay me X. And if I did it under a different name, they could pay me X plus. So I thought, different name sounds good.
Yeah, that
And
sounds great. I mean, I like to eat.
yeah, yeah, I like to eat. I love paying a mortgage. And so I chose DB Jackson. DB are my first two initials. My father,
Mhm.
who had died fairly recently, was named Jack, and so it was a natural name for me. And so
That's cool.
at this point, I've written, I have 6 books out in the Thief Taker series, and several short stories, probably 10 short stories. And I also have a time travel epic fantasy series out under the DB Jackson.
Fun.
Yeah. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
that's cool.
That was a fun one.
Well, I have
So
to say, Thief Taker it's fascinating to me because you've got thief. I mean, they take things already. So, like, where did that term come from? What sparked that cool idea?
thief taking is a historical phenomenon.
Nuh-uh.
Yes, thief taking uh, was, it kind of started in early 18th century Britain.
Mhm.
And it was basically a system that grew up in the absence of an established police force in major cities.
Mm,
Thief
gotcha.
takers were people who went and found thieves, got back the stolen goods, and returned them to the rightful owner for a fee. They were kind of the first.
So like bounty hunters, kind of.
Yeah, the first private investigators, the first bounty hunters. Yes, and
So
uh,
cool.
it was really cool. And I read about it because we were this really convoluted story, but you asked.
I did. I asked for
So
it. Give it to me.
my wife and I were heading to Australia. My wife and I and our 2 daughters for a year because she had a sabbatical. My wife did, and whenever we go someplace or whenever we do anything new, we read books about it because that's who we are. And we read a book called The Fatal Shore. And there was in The Fatal Shore about the founding of Australia, because it's a penal colony, there was all this stuff about policing and prisons and stuff like that. And they
Yeah.
talked about thief takers. And they talked about the very first famous thief taker, whose name was Jonathan Wild. Jonathan Wild was this character out of a Dickens novel, you would
Yeah,
think,
that's
but
a
he was,
superhero name right there.
I know, but he was
Yeah.
real, and that was his real name. And he was London's first really, really famous thief taker. And actually, if you read David Liss, who is a marvelous, marvelous historical writer, he has a couple of books about Jonathan Wild, novels, kind of novelizations of his life. Anyway, Jonathan
Historical
Wild,
fiction's the way to learn history, as far as I'm concerned. It's way more fun.
yes, Jonathan Wild became famous and rich by not only being a great thief taker, but by
Mhm.
being responsible for all the thieving that he solved. And so he would hire people to steal stuff from people, get the goods, return those goods to the rightful owner for a fee. And he built a reputation as a man who could solve any crime because he was
Because he was
stealing the
causing
stuff
them.
that he was returning. And
That's not a superhero name, it's a villain name.
he had this amazing career of thief taking, and he was this incredible figure, and he was hanged at the age of 27.
Holy moly. Well,
I
he
read
didn't
that.
get away with it forever, huh?
No, I read that story in a discursive footnote in this book and thought, I'm going to write about thief takers. And my
Fun.
lead character's nemesis is a woman named Saphira Price, who operates in Boston the way Jonathan Wild operated in London. And she does much the same thing. And she is charismatic and sexual and cruel, but funny. And she is probably my favorite character of all time. But she is based on Jonathan Wild. So there you go.
So cool. I had no idea it was a real term. I'm so fascinated. Friday Blue wants to know, you talked about that you have time travel stories and stuff. Do you ever like play with reincarnation in your stories?
I never have, which is not to say that I won't, but I never have.
Never have. Not yet. Not yet.
No, not yet.
No. Do you have any kind of like, when you do the time travel, you always have the trope of meeting your younger self or killing your grandfather? Like, how do you deal with those kind of things?
So writing time travel will make your brain explode. It is, because every single plot point becomes negotiable. If your characters who can time travel don't like what's happened to them, they can fix it, which is really, really problematic for a writer. And so the way I solved that was, for every year my characters they can go back in time and then they can return to their time. For every year they go back, they spend a year of their lives. And if they go back to their own time, they spend another year of their lives. So they can't go back and change all sorts. If they go back 100 years, they arrive dead, which is not really to their advantage. So it limits the power of time travel, both to mess with my plots and to create those sorts of paradoxes that trip up time travel writers all the time.
That's very clever. So if they're 30 years old, they can't go back in time more than 30 years. Not that that would help them, because they'd be an infant anyways.
They can go back. No, they could go back 40 years, but they would arrive in the body of a 70-year-old. They age the years.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
So my lead character is a 15-year-old boy. He goes back 14 years. He arrives in the body of a 29-year-old man. If he wants to go back to his time, he's going to be 44. And so that's how I controlled the ability of the time travel to mess up my timelines and such. But that said, there are, in the third book and the final book in the trilogy, there are 4 iterations of one character. So there you go.
Fun. Can you imagine talking to your younger self? There's no way. She didn't listen to anyone. I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah, it was a fun book to write when my brain wasn't going.
Awesome. I bet your editor loved you for that.
Yeah, I went through a couple of editors, actually.
Their minds did explode. They were like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And let's see, in your bio, it says that you've been talking about history and all these things you have learned and stuff, but you actually have a PhD in history from Stanford.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive. Because I want to say, now you make stuff up for a living, and you help others make stuff up better for a living. Right. So why aren't you smoking a pipe and, regaling college students about the good old times? Like, why did you learn that and then decide to write fiction for a living?
Because I always knew I wanted to write fiction. I wrote my first book when I was 6. And I went to college thinking I was going to be a creative writing major. My parents kind of talked me out of it. And it was like, yeah, you want to be a creative writing major so that you can then drive a cab or flip burgers in a McDonald's.
Oh, because history is so much more practical. Seriously?
Well, at least with history, you can get a teaching job and you can still write. This is what they... So I did love history in college. And so I thought, okay, I'll give this a shot. Mm-hmm. But it didn't take. And actually what happened was I met my wife in graduate school. So I'm really glad I went. I'm glad I did this. But after I finished my PhD, which was in May, and jobs weren't coming until October, she said to me, since the day I met you, you've been talking about writing a novel, and you have 5 months. Why don't you start writing fiction?
Do it.
And see if you enjoy it, because you're not enjoying history. So I did. I gave those 5 chapters or so that I wrote to a friend of mine who served as my agent. And on a Thursday in March, I got a call from Colorado State University offering me what was actually my dream teaching job. And the following morning, I got a call from an editor at Tor Books who wanted to buy my first novel. And both of them said, we'd like an answer on Monday. amazing stuff. And so
Everything lined up right there.
yeah, and so I chose writing, and my wife had already taken an academic job, and so we have stayed in that little college town since then, and it's all worked out great. I've been writing ever since. She's been teaching and being an administrator. She is currently the acting president of the university, and it's all worked out really well.
So cool. Man,
So
that's like a fairy tale. This is like a fairy tale story right here.
yeah, it's pretty amazing, actually.
I kind of love that. I have no more questions now. Like, that's just so cool. I don't know how I can talk. It was like, we always say work hard and you can get there, but we know reality, that's not true, but it it totally worked. That's just beautiful.
It did.
Oh my
And she
gosh.
said at the time when the contract came in, it was for, I mean, the money was teeny tiny. The
Well, yeah.
contract was like this big. But she said, well, we don't have kids, we don't have a mortgage, we were renting a cheap place. And she said, we'll give it 5 years. We'll treat it as another stint in graduate school, and we'll see what happens. And that first series won the Crawford Award, and my second series with Tor, my advances went way up, and that happened at 5 years. And so we just kept on going.
You're like, there you go.
Yeah.
I just love that. And yet you still get to be part of that academic world through your wife. So you
Yes.
kind of can put a foot in both worlds.
Absolutely. And I do talks
Yeah.
at the university, and I've
Mhm.
done some work with the Writing House at the university. And so, yeah, we've had a very nice life here.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So your daughters, did any of them want to do something crazy and you were like, no, you must like go do something that's going to pay the bills? Or like, did you give them crazy advice? Like, just do it. Like what happened there?
They have found their own path. One of them was the younger one was a psych major and a criminal justice and creative writing minor. And she is now doing some editing on the side, making extra income because her job is good, but she wants a little more cash. So she's doing editing right now for a publisher, and a publisher who she's known since she was going with me to conventions, because he and I go to the same conventions together. So she edits for him.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is.
She's living the dream too, man. She's living.
Yeah. And the older one, she's a sound design executive producer in New York. And so she's doing cool stuff all on her own.
So you did tell them to live your dreams. You were trying to be nice, but no, you totally let them live their dreams. And I think that's wonderful. Good for you.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So we talked about your kids now. So I'm wondering, like, as you were growing up, was there anything that you read that made you really think, I really want to do this? So you said since age 6. I don't know what's that start? Dr. Seuss? I don't know what's before that.
Yeah, I don't remember. Babar. Did you ever read Babar?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the elephant. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Babar books. Yeah, so I wrote something when I was 6. It was not very good. I couldn't get it published.
Well, you were 6. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I couldn't get it published. I tried so hard.
I had to self-publish it. It was really a pain.
I love that. Yeah, but what did the cover look like?
I drew the cover, which didn't help matters at all.
See, authors do not make your own covers. This is the lesson.
That's right.
And you learned it young. That's good.
Yep. Construction paper with yarn, that sort of thing.
I bet it sold like hotcakes to your parents, though. I mean, come on.
Yeah, they bought every copy, I'm sure. When I was 11 years old, I went to sleepaway camp. And I don't know if you ever went to sleepaway camp, but it's not like sleepaway camp for kids these days where it's like 1 week or 2 weeks. When we were young, our parents sent us to sleepaway camp for like 8 weeks or 7 weeks at a time for the entire summer. And then they said, have fun, we're going to Europe. And
no, my parents didn't have any money. That was not happening with my parents.
my parents had some money. So that's what they did. They sent us all to sleepaway camp. We went for weeks and they traveled. So I was at sleepaway camp, and my parents had told someone, like the lead counselor, they ask, are there any things you'd like your child to do while they're here? Yes, we want David to do theater. We think he'd be great in theater. Apparently they thought I was a ham even then. And so I was told
wrong.
this.
They knew you, David. Yeah.
Yes, they weren't wrong.
They were wrong.
So I was told this by my head counselor, and I was like, okay, so I'll try out for a play. So I tried out for this play. And I somehow managed on my first try to get the title role in this thing I'd never heard of called The Hobbit. And it was a abridged dramatization of.
It wasn't an 8-hour long play?
No, it wasn't. It was like an hour 15 minutes or something like that. But I played Bilbo Baggins.
Oh, you got the lead in your first play?
And I fell in love with the script. I
Oh,
totally fell in love. And I got home and I was like, I need to read this book. And that was what launched me into
that was it. You
spec
were
fic.
lost forever.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah, there's no going back once you go in, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I got into it. I was 11 years old and I played Bilbo Baggins.
So cool. What a unique way. Usually it's we found it in the library, your parent gave it to you. You're like, no, I did the play.
Yeah.
And you don't have you ever considered writing plays or writing screenplays or anything like that?
I have not. I've done a couple of novelizations. I've worked with scripts on that
Mhm.
level. I've never tried to write my own script, and I would like to, because I feel like dialogue is one of the things I do pretty well,
Well. Mhm.
and so I'd love to give it a shot.
Mhm.
But it really is. I mean, I've worked with enough scripts to know it really is like learning a new language in a way. It's a very different animal.
Mhm.
It's not an easy transition, I don't think,
Yeah.
from writing novels to writing scripts. It draws on different parts of the brain. You have to think cinematically. You have to think in very discrete scenes. And it would. I'm old, and I'm not sure I'm ready to learn that kind of new trick.
And you
So,
have to think about budget, right? We don't have to
well,
think about that
yes,
when we're writing, you know? I
yeah,
mean, we can make whatever scenes we want.
yes. I'm proofreading my next novel right now, and there was a scene I was just working on. I was like, oh, that would look so cool in a movie, but boy, that would be expensive.
See? Oh, I love it. At least the
Yeah.
technology is finally catching up with our imagination, right?
Yes,
People
absolutely.
always like, man, those like fantasy sci-fi movies in the 80s, like they were horrible. We're like, yeah, but we ate them up because it's all we
It
had,
was
you
all we
know?
had.
Yeah, so
Yes.
we will take whatever they gave us because we wanted it so badly.
Yep.
So yeah, we're spoiled now. It's our time now. And all the mundanes are just coming on and enjoying it. We're like, we told you.
Yeah. We've
We
been
told you.
talking about this for years, man.
We
Yep.
knew it was going to happen. Well, I'm wondering, you have so much out in the world, so many books, so many short stories. Which book was the hardest to write?
The hardest to write was the first time travel epic fantasy series. It's called Time's Children.
Mm,
Um, and it was the hardest to write because I am usually an outliner. On
mhm.
the planner to pantser range, I'm a planner.
Yeah.
And for
Wait,
some
wait, you
reason,
didn't plan your time travel novel of all things?
exactly, I
What?
could not outline the book. And I spent months, 4 months, maybe even more, trying to outline the book. And finally, my wife just said to me, she said, you just have to write this,
Just write it.
because you're spinning your wheels, you're not helping yourself. Just start writing and see what happens. I pantsed a 140,000 word time travel
Time
novel.
travel?
Yeah.
Holy moly. No
And
wonder you
it
went through
was,
so many editors, just for the record, I think
yeah,
that's.
yeah,
Yeah.
seriously. And my agent read the first draft and she came back to me and she said, I like certain elements of this, but you need to rewrite the second half of the book. And she was right. And I thought, well, maybe I can outline the rewrite. And it's like, nope. And so I then wrote 60,000 words more, replacing, and even that I had to pants. But it is the best reviewed book I've ever written.
That's pretty cool. It
Yeah.
came from somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I found interesting while I
Mhm.
was working, and you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway.
Tell me.
I
I'm
usually
listening.
I usually write to improv music. I write to jazz or improvisational bluegrass.
Mhm.
And I couldn't do that with this book. And I think it's because I usually outline and then the music kind of spurs my organic writing to fill in the gaps in the outline. With that book, I had to listen to classical music as if I was imposing structure on my process from outside.
Interesting.
So yeah, yeah,
My gosh, the human brain is fascinating. Which, by the way, your wife is also one in a million. Holy moly!
yeah, yeah. She's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Now I want to meet her. Next con, bring her along
Okay.
because I want to meet her. Um, the most of us are like, our spouses tolerate what we do, and you're like, nah, are you kidding? Like, she told me I should do it, and then she helped me, and she gives me good advice. I'm like,
Yes.
what?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we talked about the hardest book. Which character do you relate to the most?
Wow. That's an interesting question. Probably Ethan Cale, who is the Thief Taker in my Thief Taker series.
Oh,
And
nice.
I relate to him because he's an unusual and unlikely hero. He's older. We meet him in the first Thief Taker book, and he's already creeping up on 40, which for a kind of a fantasy hero, that's a little bit older
It's up
than what
there.
you'd expect. And
Usually that's the
especially,
mentor in fantasy.
right.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
especially in a colonial setting when life expectancy wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
And he had been in prison for 14 years. He was an ex-con. He had been wounded in prison, and he walked with a pronounced limp. He had had his heart shattered by a relationship that ended when he was imprisoned for mutiny on a ship. And so he's broken. He's broken in so many ways, but he just kind of keeps going forward. And it's not that my life has been so tough that I
Yeah, I was
feel
gonna say, wait a minute, wait. This is the one you relate to the most? That thing I said about your wife. Maybe we need to talk again.
No,
Okay,
no,
go.
no. It's not that. It's more
Okay.
this sense of being seasoned, having seen a lot, having been through a lot, good or bad, but just having lived. And mostly the fact that, as I say, he's not the typical hero. He can do magic, but he's not the strongest guy. He's not the best looking guy. He's pretty smart, but he just has enough to get by. And that's kind of how I feel about myself. I'm not the strongest guy. I'm not the best looking guy. I'm not the smartest guy, but I have enough to get by. And so I feel I relate to Ethan very well. And I love writing him.
Cool.
I love writing him.
That's fun. Seems like that seriously, that's now being added to my TBR, which by the way is almost as long on Goodreads as my read. Like, it's pretty big and I can't stop.
Yeah.
That's what keeps me alive. Things I haven't done yet, right? Like I have to catch up. So apparently I'm never going to die because that's the only way I'm going to finish all these books.
There you go.
So thanks a lot, David.
It's my pleasure. I am just contributing to your immortality.
Forever and ever. Sorry, Zapho, you're never going to get your second wife because I'm never going to die. I'm sorry. He's very sad now. I know we had an agreement, but I'm sorry. I'm never going to die now. That's the way it goes.
She's your trophy, man.
That's right.
Yep.
So have you ever like met another professional that had or what professional? I keep thinking about your question. Sorry, David. You say you're not the smartest. I don't know. You're pretty much up there. What professional have you met in your writing career that has made the most difference for you? See, I told you we asked the hard questions.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So is it okay if this person made the difference before I met them?
There's no rule. So yeah.
Oh, that's right. There are no rules. I forgot.
No rules.
So I'm going to answer a different question. No.
Okay, there's some rules.
So the answer is Guy Gavriel Kay.
Okay.
Guy Kay is a fantasy writer. I think he's actually the finest living fantasy writer right now. He is unbelievably good, and he has been doing this for a very long time. His standalone fantasy novel Tagana is the single greatest fantasy I've ever read.
Really?
Just amazing. And he has been so I said before that doing the play when I was a kid made me want to read as much fantasy as I could, starting with Tolkien. Reading Guy's work showed me what kind of writer I wanted to be, because his work, his world building is gorgeous, and his characters are deep and fabulous and so rich and believable, and his prose is exquisite. And I didn't want to write just nonstop action. My books are fairly literary, I think. And that's because of Guy. That's because I read his books and they sung to me. And that's how I wanted to write. And so several years back, I was attending a con out in Calgary called When Words Collide, which is it's actually not a con, it's a book festival. It's a marvelous thing. Unfortunately, this is their last year. But I've been there several times. I've been a guest of honor a couple of times with that group in Calgary. And I was coming back, and Guy was guest of honor that year, and he and I really hadn't met. And I got in touch with the con organizer, and I said, you need to do a guest of honor interview with Guy, and I want to do the interview. And so he said, yeah, that sounds great. So I did his interview with Guy and had read everything he'd written to that point, and have read everything at this point that he's written to this point, and asked all these questions. And afterwards, he was like, that was a great interview. Let's go have a drink. And
like,
we have
what?
become, seriously, it was like, oh, fanboy. But we have become friends. We text, we've seen each other at a few, couple of conventions now. We compare notes on single malt scotch. We're both New York Yankees fans. I apologize, but we are.
That's sports of some sort, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
that's
just making sure. Okay.
So he's become a friend, and he's this really important person in my life now, both for his literary influence and for the fact that we're friends now.
That's magical and beautiful. Because they say don't meet your heroes because you never know, right? This one totally worked out, didn't it?
It worked out really well. Yeah.
I have to say, authors, usually you can pretty much tell though, right? Because you knew what kind of soul he was because you read his book.
Yep.
Like authors we can't keep our souls out of our books. We really can't.
No, that's absolutely true. And his I can't recommend his work highly enough. Every one of his books is just brilliant.
I don't think I've read anything by him, so I'm just look it up now.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
There goes the TBR.
It's just 2 books in one pot. That's not allowed.
Well, you should read the time travel one too.
We have. Yeah.
And the new ones. The new ones are really good.
When did he start writing?
So the first project he did, and he doesn't talk about this a lot, and I won't say much about it, except the first thing he did was actually he helped Christopher Tolkien produce the Silmarillion posthumously after J.R.R. Tolkien died. His first series, the Fionnevar Tapestry, I want to say the first book came out in 1986, but I might be wrong about that. It was in the 80s.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm going to say I have very little tolerance in my old age now. I have very little tolerance for very old books like Tolkien, right? Like I read it as a child, so there's an emotional attachment to that.
Yeah.
But, I read a lot of stuff that's, over 100 years old. I just don't have the same tolerance for certain themes that would be in these books that I can't tolerate. So that's why I wanted to see what age. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no,
TBR it is.
Yeah.
Late 80s, I'm good with it. It's all right. Yeah. That sounds awesome. Plus, I love as a writer, right? It's important to read. I know you hear that all the time, but I don't think it's just important to read. It's important to read somebody who is better than you are, so that you can also improve your craft.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I love getting that advice. Thank you. I don't know how, but I also did the same thing, right? I read like every fantasy I could get a hold of, through the 80s and 90s. So I don't know how I missed them. So I'm gonna have to go back and find it. You know what? I bet you I'll pick it up and I'll be like, oh wait, I did read this book, right? Because I can't imagine. I can't imagine I missed him. But we'll find out. So thank you. Yeah. But this is about David B. Coe tonight. So we shall talk about you. And we have a lightning round where we ask the most important questions of the evening, but you can't think about them. You just have to answer them. You ready?
Oh God. Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Anything with caramel, like caramel mixed in with it. So
fish
food from Ben & Jerry's. Because
fish food has caramel in it?
Yes, it does.
Caramel? What is that?
PHISH. It's for the band.
Oh.
Fish food.
Gotcha. All right, it's all clear now. Okay, now, what weird thing do you collect?
Baseball cards.
Ooh. Let's see. That's that sports ball thing again,
yeah,
right?
That's
okay,
thing.
Just I want to make sure I'm aboard. Okay. What was the last movie you saw in theaters?
Good Lord. I have no freaking idea. um,
COVID's
seriously,
over. You can go back now, right?
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's serious. I think it was the middle movie of the third Star Wars trilogy. That's how long it's been.
So this has nothing to do with COVID. Just movies are not your thing. At
We
least
live
not in
in
the
a
theater.
we live in a tiny, tiny, tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, and getting to movies is a pain in the butt.
You're like, I want to see it, but
Yeah,
that's a
I
long
mean,
drive.
we actually we fly to Europe and back just so we can see movies. I mean, you know.
Right. It's not for the bread, cheese, or wine. No, it's for the
No, no,
movie
no.
theaters. Yeah. That's funny. Let's see. If they could be tamed, what wild animal would you like as a pet?
Wolf.
That was quick. You
Yeah,
like this one? Wolf.
I love dogs. I love big, beautiful dogs.
Oh, well, wolf would qualify, wouldn't it? If they could be tamed.
Yes.
What is the first thing you do in the morning besides like after you're done peeing? What's the first thing you do after that?
I actually do a workout. I exercise.
Healthy. You make all of us look bad, David. Stop it. Okay.
If you're gonna ask the question, you got to live with the answer.
I know. I'm just gonna cross that one off. When staying in a hotel, do you unpack?
Do I unpack?
Mhm.
Depends on the hotel. Sometimes I do, but sometimes if the hotel feels like you really don't want your clothes touching anything other than the interior of your bag, no, not so much. I'll keep them in the bag.
Come on, man. We're too old to stay in those hotels anymore. You
I
know.
but
I know that
sometimes
doesn't
cons
happen.
are in those hotels,
That's
right?
Also true. You are correct. It cannot be denied. That is a good point.
Yeah.
What TV show is your guilty pleasure?
Bridgerton.
Oh, fair. That's not a guilty pleasure. That's just pleasure.
A lot of sex. A lot of sex in Bridgerton.
Well, I mean, there's more in the book, but yeah, that
Yeah.
work.
So yeah.
Excellent. David, you have been a wonderful guest. Where can fans find you and your work?
I can be found at davidbco.com. And actually you can find links to everything from there, to Facebook stuff, Twitter stuff, the DB Jackson website you can link to from there. You can find my editing services there. There's a bookstore on the site if you want to order books. Everything
Smart.
you can find there.
Very cool. So now that David is your new favorite author, please make sure to review his work, and you can review us wherever it is you get your podcast. You can also follow us on Twitch or subscribe on YouTube. And next week we're supposed to be off, but I think we'll come on just to talk about like Fan Expo and cool stuff that we did. So we're going to come on just to say hi. So we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.